Alright, so today what we're going to be talking about is some of the ideas of animal ethics. So we've certainly talked before about humans and human ethics and the environment and where that sort of comes into play. Now, since we're at the end of the year and we've covered most of our TEKS and testings coming up, I want to talk about this topic here, so animal ethics, and the idea of should animals be kept in captivity or followed for a business. Oops. Alright, so what we're going to need for today's lesson is your scientific journal and something to write with. At the end, we're also going to have a little bit of a discussion and we are going to share with the class, but for now, this is what you need. So first off, I want to talk about ecotourism. So ecotourism is defined as a form of tourism that involves visiting fragile, pristine, and relatively undisturbed natural areas. It's intended as a low-impact and often small-scale alternative to standard commercial or mass tourism. I included a cute little cartoon to go along with it. There's a giraffe and a rhino that are watching people push a truck, and the caption is only 15 kilometers to go to the next gas station, and the giraffe tells the rhino, eco-tourists, I'd assume. Alright, so ecotourism can be a number of different things. It can be hiking, it can be you go out on a safari, you can be kayaking, or you can be cage diving with sharks. So these are all super awesome possibilities for what ecotourism could be, but it's not limited to that. It's just a way for you to go out and enjoy the environment and enjoy nature and take something away from it, as opposed to going to an amusement park or going to like the movies. So these are all different examples. So I want you to take about a minute and write in your journals maybe a form of ecotourism that you've participated in the past or something that you would like to do. So go ahead and take about a minute to do that now. Alright, moving right along. My clicker wants to work with me. There we go. Alright, so these are different ways of experiencing wildlife. So this is an example here. We have a diver that is hanging out with a whole bunch of sea lions, so it's probably someplace quite cold. But it's a way that people can pay to experience nature up close. A lot of times this provides different areas that have these nature, has this nature that we want to see. It provides economic boosts to them. So they get our money, very much like we're in Galveston, this is a tourist town, so we get to keep all the tourist money and that goes to our economy. A lot of times this also leads to conservation. So money from these tours can be used to help preserve the natural areas. And it also leads to knowledge about these new topics that maybe the people are experiencing for the first time. So here's a quote that I really enjoy. It's something that has spoken to me for a very long time. And the quote goes, "In the end, we will conserve only what we love, we will love only what we understand, and we will understand only what we are taught." And this is by Baba Diom. And it's something that's very impactful because unless you have experienced something, how can you start to understand it? And if you don't understand it, how can you love it? And if you don't love it, why would you want to save it? So this is sort of like step one for a lot of the conservation process. Oops. All right. So some of the downsides of ecotourism. Yes, everybody wants to go and see these lions and these tigers and see animals on whale watches and hikes and experience these up close. But for instance, there have been downsides that have been reported with ecotourism. For instance, with something like dolphin encounters. This is out of Kaikoura in New Zealand. People can pay to go and snorkel with dusky dolphins. So some of the issue is that these animals have natural behaviors, and those natural behaviors will be changed because of this like human interaction that's starting. So for instance, we can have a very large school of, or pod of dolphins that are hunting, but whenever these boats show up, it scares all of the fish away. So instead of hunting for food, now these dusky dolphins are sort of like surrounded by humans that are interacting with them. So there have been studies that have shown that animals that are sort of followed around in this manner exhibit lots of stress and will have changes of behavior. Other downsides include having to use tactics like chumming to attract predators. So that's what we see up here. There's a shark that is reacting to food in the water. This can lead to dependence on humans for their food, or whenever they see humans, they expect food. Now, whenever you're in the water and there's a shark involved, and the shark wants food from you, and you don't have food, that can lead to issues, as you might imagine. And then also there is the problem with some of these wild lands, particularly in Africa. These wild lands that otherwise wouldn't have been touched by humans or developed by humans have to be developed to deal with the growing need of being able to support humans in some of these areas. So we would have to develop like savanna grassland and turn it into a good place to house lots of people, like in a resort, for some of these safaris. So it can be detrimental to habitats as well as animals itself. So that's ecotourism. So this here we're going to talk about zoos and aquariums. So zoos are really interesting. We have a lot of animals that are in captivity. You can have animals from all over the world in a fairly small location. Some of the most magical places that I've been are zoos. And they bring sort of an educational and fun opportunity to people to see animals that most people aren't going to see in their lifetime. So you can see bears, you can see tigers, you can see snakes, you can see all sorts of creatures from all over the world all at once. So this is a way of bringing conservation to people and allowing them to experience something that otherwise they wouldn't ever be able to. They also help to educate people about conservation issues. So for instance, they can show an orangutan here and explain these animals are going extinct because of habitat loss, because of palm oil. And it can help bring awareness to some of these issues, such as palm oil plantations, and help sort of ignite the fire to get some of these problems lessened. They can also help with something called species survival plans. It's basically a breeding program that different animals can be involved with to help lessen the impact of things like habitat loss and poaching. So it gives different species that are endangered of going extinct the possibility to bounce back and the population to grow. Aquariums are basically zoos, but they focus on aquatic environments. You can see anything from large whales to whale sharks here, manta rays, and all sorts of different fish. It also talks about freshwater environments. And that's me whenever I worked in an aquarium. So the downside to both of these places is the animals have to come from somewhere. So oftentimes animals are taken from captivity and put in, taken from the wild and put in captivity. Not all of them have a very high standard of care. So throughout the United States, there's something known as the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and they have very high standards of care, including the types of food that should be offered, veterinary care, educational facilities, all of that, levels of education that workers need to have to ensure high quality care for the animals. Not all places have those standards. So you could end up with something like this, where we have, for instance, a bear that is just sort of in a barren concrete pit, and they're not really well cared for. Here we also have a photo of a killer whale that was taken from the wild in a net and was transported someplace else to have in captivity. And then even further than that, some zoos participate in sort of the black market for exotic animals. So people, for instance, everybody wants a pet tiger. They have to come from somewhere. So in some cases, that is a downside to some of these places. It gives an outlet for people looking for some of these black market creatures. All right, so we've talked about a lot here in the last couple of minutes, but I want to know what you think. And everybody has different levels of knowledge on this topic, and everybody has different opinions. So I want you to find a partner, and I want you to discuss with your partner this question. Should we still use ecotourism, zoos, and aquariums? So should we have these animals in captivity or follow them around for basically our benefit? I want you to say why or why not. So I'm going to use a timer, and everyone is going to get 1 minute to sort of discuss their thoughts with each other. Speak with your partner. Be sure to use good listening skills. And then once we are done, we're going to talk to each of you and see what some of those big sticking points were, and we're going to copy them down on our T-chart here. You are going to fill this out in your journal as we go along. All right? So go ahead, find yourself a buddy. Once everybody has found a buddy, we will begin our discussion.